ethnic violence spreads in Burma as the country edges towards democracy. Does the Buddhist majority have a problem with its Muslim population? Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Phil Rees. Well, the Burmese government issued a state of emergency in the central city of Wintle near Mandalay after 3 days of ethnic violence between Muslims and Buddhists left at least 40 dead and forced thousands to flee their homes. As more than half a century of military rule eases, what's behind the violence? That will be our first discussion today. In part two, the jailed leader of the Kurdish separatist party calls for its fighters to lay down their arms and withdraw from Turkey. Well, does this mean that the 3 decades-old demand for an independent Kurdish state is over? We'll explore what the ceasefire means for Kurds in half an hour. Now, in June of 2012, Western Burma went up in flames as sectarian fighting between Muslims and Buddhists left hundreds dead. But it wasn't a battle between two equal sides. The police and the security services sided with the Buddhist Rakhines. Hundreds died and tens of thousands of Rohingya Muslims, they're a subgroup there, they still remain in camps, unable to return to their homes. Well, much of that scenario was repeated last week, but this time in central Burma, as Alex MacDonald reports.
They are trying to reward.
Burma has 3 million Muslims living in a Buddhist-majority country. Last week, an altercation involving a Muslim shop owner in the central city of Wintle led to days of rioting and violence in which 40 Muslims were killed. It is just the latest in what seems to be an epidemic of anti-Muslim violence in the country. Buddhist on Muslim violence was originally localized within the Khin state, with the ethnic minority Rohingya the main targets of racist attacks. However, the conflict has now spread beyond the Rohingya to Muslims in other parts of the country, opening up bitter divisions and long-simmering hatred.
There's always been a deep sort of underlying prejudice in large parts of Burmese society against Muslims, and that's partly because the successive dictatorships in the country have tried to use a sort of twisted nationalist form of Buddhism to build support and justify their rule. And sadly that has affected the culture and some of the people in Burma.
People have left flowers and messages outside the Burmese embassy in protest over the new, supposedly more democratic government's inaction over continuing violence in the country. The government has warned that the violence is a threat to the country's newly found freedoms. Although the military is still nominally in charge, it has sacrificed some power to a civilian government led by President Thon. Now, some observers see a risk that they could use the disarray in the country to claw back some of that power.
Police are just keep watching. They don't involve. They don't step in. This is what makes us very sad. And when victims, they contact the government and the militaries, and they said this is civilian government. We can't involve. And when they contact the police station, they said we are outnumbered. And this is really clearly highlight the intention of Burmese government.
The army has imposed a dusk to dawn curfew in 3 townships in light of the violence. A report by Human Rights Watch has accused the government of segregating the Muslim populations in Burma and denying them access to much-needed aid. Without the government's support and under threat of more violence, Burma's Muslims face a bleak future. Alex MacDonald, Islam Channel.
Well, I'm pleased to have in the studio Waihnin Pwint from the Burma Campaign UK. We also have the president of the Burmese Rohingya organisation in the UK, Khin. And on the phone, we're joined by Justin Wintle, the author of Perfect Hostage, a biography of Aung San Suu Kyi. Well, I mean, if I could start with you, Waihnin. I mean, obviously the violence last year was in Rakhine State, or Arakan, that's in the far west, and people dismissed, or people talked about in terms of just, you know, 2 groups, sectarian violence springing out. But, I mean, what does this tell you? And is this part of the same kind of problem?
Well, I would say that what's going on in Burma, if you look at the society, there are lots of, you know, anti-Muslim things going on. There are, it's partly because people don't have much understanding about each other's religions, and also at the same time government is not really trying to talk about it. I mean, we have people like Muslims, Christian, animists living in the country, but majority of people are Buddhists, and government trying to use Buddhism as a propaganda sometimes. So it kind of, it's been brainwashing people for a long time. So I think we need to have a kind of, more understanding with each other for religions, because after what happened in Wintle, we can see that there are lots of hatred and misunderstanding with each other and to other religions.
Wintle, just to perhaps viewers, geography may not be the top point, but that's actually near Mandalay, isn't it? It's in the kind of heartland of Burma, not one of the fringes, because around what we call Burma, there are many ethnic groups there, but this wasn't that. This was actually in the kind of heartland, wasn't it?
Yes, it's very close to Mandalay. It's a very central part of Burma. And I mean, we are minorities from the country, and just because we have a different religions, why would someone want to kill us? Is that because of our religions? So, and also, if you look at the problems, what happened in Wintle was people were killed in front of security police. They just sat there, or they just watch, and young children under 14 were killed. I mean, I'm talking about killing brutally, not just stabbing them. It's very, very sad for me to see people in my country are killing each other. So I think, we need to have more understanding. To have better understanding with each other religions, we need international support for that. Because we've been living under military dictatorship for a very long time, and now the country is starting to open up.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the international reaction a little bit later. But I mean, I just want to bring in Justin Wintle here on the phone. I mean, Justin, you've heard that. I mean, give a bit of context to this. Obviously, many of those who are consider themselves now Muslim in Burma did come during British colonial rule, and there's been a legacy of that. Is that fair?
Well, generally speaking, that's fair. The Muslim community in Myanmar, Burma, is led. I mean, the first Muslims who came to that area were Arab traders centuries ago. You then had a trickle of people, mainly into Arakan, which was a separate state at one point, from Bengal. So it's built up over the years, but the great influx of Muslims into Burma, as it's called then, was certainly under British rule. And the British introduced these people very often on 6-month contracts to do work. The attraction for the British was that the Muslims worked hard and they didn't drink. So it was a sort of a profitable exercise. And then increasingly the Muslims stayed, and they've been there for, particularly in Rakhine State, as Arakan is now called, they've been there for several generations. And they should be accorded the full civil rights. But there is an underlying prejudice amongst the Burman people that this population, which is different from them ethnically and religiously, was kind of imposed upon them by the sort of British. And there's been communal violence going on for years and years, I'm afraid.
But I mean, in terms of, the person you wrote the book on, Aung San Suu Kyi, I mean, she has been remarkably silent about this. I mean, what does this tell you about the democracy in Burma and the nature of Burmese identity and nationhood?
Well, let's just talk about Aung San Suu Kyi for a moment. She's not been entirely silent. I mean, last year when there was that horrible communal violence in Rakhine State, she did express sympathy for the Muslims, but she didn't go the full hog, and that's been the problem. She didn't say these people who've been here for generations, these families and so forth, they deserve full civil rights and citizenship, which is a big issue, and they should be protected. Now, whether she is in a quiet way trying to talk to the government and saying, well, we must do something about this, I don't know, but there's no sign of that. What I would say is that she is, and I've said this to the anger of some activists. I've always said that she's innately a patrician character. She's Burmese through and through, and there is this deep-seated resentment heart and say she doesn't share in that resentment at the moment on the evidence we have.
Okay, Justin, well, stay with us. I mean, you know, Khin, you're Rohingya. You were born and brought up in Rakhine State. Obviously there, as you say, people have been there for generations, are denied all basic rights. How do you put that in the context of what's been happening this weekend, and indeed some of the things that Justin Wintle was talking about in that kind of, in effect, racism?
Well, when we talk about Rohingya issue and all the Muslims issue, we need to see in Burma that it's about since 1962, when General Lewin took power. You know, there is divide and rule policy, anti-Muslim campaign was going on a bit.
This is the dictator who, well, his family still remained very rich there, but he was a dictator for many years that basically ended the brief democracy in Burma.
Yeah, and what happened currently is this, as far as we see, this anti-Muslim campaign was going on, you know, since June 2012, I should say, what we can see through what happened
since the spark in what happened in the initial riots in June in Rakhine. It spread, has it?
Yeah. So, firstly, this anti-Muslim campaign was properly established in Rakhine State. So I should say this is the people, same people, what happened in Wintle. That's plan they implemented in Rakhine State. And from there, you know, they made up a kind of more stronger campaign. Illegal immigrant, they use what? The Rohingya illegal immigrant, this is the main issue. But when you look at the basic problem here, this is not Rohingya illegal immigrant issue. This is anti-Muslim issue. In Burma, you know, anti-Muslim was quite a stronger getting on. The government is allowing it. So the point behind here is the anti-Muslim, the religious, you know, normally what they try to do, in Burma, make a problem with things.
So you think it's wrong to just isolate the Rohingya issue, which of course is to do with another ethnic group, the Rakhine, the Khin there? You think that actually the problem is actually much broader and shouldn't simply be seen in a different way?
Well, it's quite broader, I should say. It's quite broader. If you look at what happened in Rakhine State, this is the same way what we have seen, you know, 10 people, 3rd of June 2012, 10, you know, pilgrims were killed by, you know, a kind of group in Taungu Township. So that group are the same group what we have seen recently in Wintle.
So you think that basically thugs,
So,
you think it was Rakhine thugs, at that time in June, they took, I think, what was it, about 8 people off a bus and basically butchered them. But do you think it's similar groups of thugs who go around and with, in a sense, without the police or the military doing anything?
Well, you can see here, they did not take any action for those 10 people who were brutally killed in Taungu, 3rd of June.
Nobody's been punished for those.
Nobody was punished, and there is the so-called a commission they established on that time. But we did not see any action, any result, any outcome from that. So when we look at a bit further, the government have properly, systematically also incited it. You know, anti-Muslim campaign is going everywhere. It's about 1 year going on.
At that time, I mean, I want to bring in Justin Wintle, though, that before we come to you, Waihnin, again, because, I mean, Justin, of course, at the time that the president, Thein Sein, has said that the problems in Rakhine State were to do with Rakhine nationalists, and it wasn't really a broader problem. And the fact that the army were honest brokers then, that they simply went in to basically separate sectarian and communal fighting. I mean, do you think that what's happened now sort of shows this up to be a lie?
Well, I think it's. I'm not sure that their government has deliberately incited anti-Muslim movements, but the sad thing is that the security forces have not operated in an impartial way. So that's good. I think more generally speaking, on just listening to what's been said, there are a couple of points I'd make. The first is that the persecution, particularly of the Rohingya people in Rakhine State, has been going on for decades. Actually, they've had and there were periodically there were tens of thousands of refugees going into Bangladesh, etc. What one has to say is that the Islamic Ummah at large, the worldwide Islamic community, didn't pay any attention to this at all, and it was just left to kind of malinger. The problem now, I think, is that as the story of the Rohingyas hit, because the country is opening up and there's much better access for Western journalists and indeed Islamic journalists, the danger is that the Muslim community within Burma is going to become radicalized down an al-Qaeda avenue. And we're already seeing some al-Qaeda-type groups in Turkey and Iraq starting to sort of take an interest. And it is so much in the government's interest to settle this problem in a civil and peaceful way. Otherwise, they're going to have a much bigger problem on their hands. Yeah,
but are they doing that? I mean, we've heard that, already from Human Rights Watch, that the segregation, the tens of thousands of the Rohingya are now in camps in southern Rakhine State are still there, and there's no real attempt to reintegrate them with the Rakhine population.
Right. And I think that the Burmese government is really not taking this whole issue as serious as it should. I mean, that said, in Rakhine State, it's odd. You've got some Muslim communities which are actually fully integrated and do live peaceably with their Rakhine neighbours, and there are others which are sort of barricaded in. Now, what distresses me is just anecdotally, I was talking to a very nice guy the other day who's a Burmese doctor and a devout Buddhist, who's going on about loving kindness and metta and tolerance and all that. And then I asked him about the Rohingyas, and his immediate reaction was, they should leave, and if they don't leave, we should throw them into the sea. There is a fantastically deep-lying racial prejudice there.
Well, it's amazing, and amazing you say that, Justin, because certainly, I mean, I travelled in the region fairly recently, and I mean, Waihnin, I found it really quite disturbing that a lot of these sentiments came from religious people, from monks, the kind of language they used, which, I mean, Justin heard, but I similarly heard such statements casually dropped in that people who'd been there for generations and who, grandfathers and great-grandfathers should suddenly pack their bags and go to some home they'd never been to.
I think it's in Burma, casual racism becomes kind of like a norms for them, because they think it's okay to call someone fat, someone ugly, or use their religions and call them names, as a nickname. So I think it's become acceptable. And also, if you look at the problems clearly, there are lots of underlying problems of anti-racist and also anti-Muslims issues going on. I mean, there are lots of hatred planted in them. I mean, those thugs and mobs can go around everywhere and they can talk about anti-Muslim or they can talk about any anti-religious issue. They can talk about it. And nothing would happen that much unless those people have hatred against Muslim. And it's been planted in them for a many long time by the government or by the religious group. So we need to kind of these problems happened before, so we need to examine why this keep going on.
I mean, do they? They're worried. Many have said to me that Buddhism itself is under threat. I mean, historically, there has been a movement eastwards there, and they feel they're somehow at the gates of protecting Buddhism in Southeast Asia from the masses of Muslims in Bangladesh and parts of India and Pakistan. I mean, is that mindset at the root of the problem?
Well, it's not for all the Buddhists in Burma. Only a handful of people are creating this hatred, and only a handful of people have a hatred against Muslim. I mean, I live in a township with Hindu temple, mosque, and a Buddhist monastery. And we would, whenever it comes to our religious ceremonies or rituals, we would all celebrate it together. It's one wonderful thing about it. I think these thugs are going around to kind of rural area with uneducated people, planting those seeds of hatred in them and say, look, these Muslims are trying to take over the country. They will take your women away. They will have, children, and these children will become an enemy of state, which is ridiculous. I mean, those people are actually playing with people's fear. Those thugs are actually planning it like properly to plant those seeds of hatred in them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to Khin, we've obviously heard that there's more access to Burma now from Justin Wintle, and more awareness, I think, of the Rohingya issue. At least it's somewhat more. But are you concerned that perhaps politicians in the West who are now looking to Burma, looking to its vast resources, and certainly the United States feels that they want to befriend the Burmese government? It's before an ally of China, and there's a lot of global politics going on there. Do you think that that's one reason why the Western governments are not actually saying it as it is?
Well, what we can see here is they stake so much on reform process. When you look at Burma, as in Burma there is multi-ethnic religious people are living in Burma, many societies there. So Burmese government is inciting and practicing, allowing to preach these kind of things. International community like US government, UK government, EU countries, they have seen what's President Thein Sein also proposed ethnic cleansing to the Rohingya are illegal immigrants, keeping them in the camps and send them to the
but Western governments aren't coming out and attacking.
They should come with a strong concrete pressure,
Yeah, but that's not being done, is it?
They haven't done anything,
so why?
I should say. They are relaxing too much pressure and they're taking so much stake on, a reform process. But they have to see the bottom line is this is not not a reform, I should say personally, where, ethnic cleansing is proposed by the President Thein Sein. So what I can say here is, they should not lift up those kind of sanctions early. They should come a stronger voice. This currently what is happening in Burma. And we are quite surprised that, US and EU countries, they're trying to lifting up all sanctions. So this is encouraging more, I should say.
I mean, Justin Wintle, in a sense, Burma or Myanmar, as they call themselves, and perhaps we should, but it is actually had a problem with its identity as soon as it became an independent nation. In terms of the Panglong Treaty, many viewers may not know, but there are perhaps 20% of the population, probably more actually, 20-30% live around the frontiers. There are Karen peoples, Kachin peoples, Mon peoples, and they've all really had often violent relationships with the government. I mean, we're coming to an end now, but how would you say that the sort of dilemma of Burmese identity is at the core of this problem?
Hardcore, really. It's quite true that there have been endless what's called ethnic insurrections, etc., which went on for the best part of 40-45 years. I think I think the worst thing to do would be to reimpose sanctions. Because that would be bad news for the Muslim people, because it would isolate Burma again. All the press, Western press, would have to leave, etc. And then the anti-Muslims would have a free hand to do as they please, and you would get ethnic cleansing there. The best hope is that as Burma is reeled into the so-called international community and opens up and through a process of osmosis more than anything else, their values change. But that's going to be a long, slow process, and I think that it is important that Western governments, and other governments indeed, if they're so inclined, that I can't see China doing anything about it.
Sure, okay.
Do say, clean up your act, guys.
Okay, well, Justin, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our studio guests. I'm afraid we're coming to a short break now. In part two, Kurdish separatists in Turkey. They've called for a ceasefire after 3 decades of conflict. What chance of lasting peace there? Well, we'll find out in a few minutes. Stay with us.